Well, happy Friday. It's my time to have time with you. Now, you may notice something. All I've got is some papers here. I wonder what I'm up to. Oh, have I got a story for you? I'll tell you what I'm up to. We had our first meeting in a long time of Poetry Canteen right here at Story and Stone. And there were 4 people that I had never laid eyes on before that read some of Mark's publicity in the newspaper. One was a newly arrived resident to the area. The other was a couple who had quite a bit of experience in literature and writing. And they came just to see what the Poetry Canteen was all about. And it turned out that Richard Cope, who was the one half of this twosome, had written poetry, but also short stories. I don't have a book to give to you, but at the Poetry Canteen, where I'm not a poet, I just love reading it. A lot of the people who are members of the Poetry Canteen actually do write poetry, but I just read poetry because that's one of my favorite things in the world to do. And Richard decided, he's my new best friend, by the way, Richard decided that if it was appropriate, would we mind if he read a story that he wrote? Well, of course we said yes. But, I mean, we are all Southern in this room, y'all know for sure. And anyway, we allowed him or encouraged him to do that. And at the conclusion of that, I said, oh, please, Richard, would you just copy those stories for me? Leave with some of my friends down at the cash register at Story and Song. Leave them there, because I know you all are going back to your home. And he said, sure. So I'm going to share a treasure with you. This is going to be by Richard Cope, The Night Toby Got Loose. This here story happened just the way I'm about to tell you, except nobody warned me first about the part where Toby got loose. Now, in Bean County, Tennessee, not much ever happens except for in July every year, the Rutledge Baptist Church has its Crown of Glory tent revival. Oh, folks everywhere come from as far off as Buffalo Creek and Moccasin Gap to hear the good word and have some fresh peach pie baked up special by the ladies' auxiliary committee. It was close to 8 o'clock on Saturday night, and everybody was saying how it was the hottest it had been since the year burned up the whole watermelon crop and half of the cantaloupes to boot. Well, Pastor Johnson done saved all the souls they was to be saved that night, and after 3 helpings of pie, he began to doze off in his chair. Miss Mattie Trent was just getting ready to give her solo rendition of the old rugged cross, dedicated to all the fine men and women who worked so hard to make this year's event such a success, when Jasper Johnson, no relation to the preacher, pulled up with Toby. Now, Toby was a one-eyed old hound dog that was meaner than a red-legged rooster. Ever since that time that possum got the best of him, he was just plain old nasty. Nobody wanted to get near him. So, just as the organ started playing the melody to Miss Addie's solo, her fiancé, Walter Goodson, said he was going to go over to talk to Jasper about Toby. Well, Soon as Walter got close to the truck, old Toby started barking and carrying on something awful. Everybody could hear what a ruckus it was, but they were still hoping Miss Addie would proceed with her scheduled performance. That's when out of nowhere come this little calico kitten. It was always there on Fridays, but never Saturdays, strolling under the tables looking for scraps to eat. Now, Miss Maywell Carter, whose husband died of cat scratch fever nigh on to 9 years ago, now saw that cat, stood up, let out a scream, and, "Good Lord, please help me!" Now, still half dozing, Pastor John heard her, and thinking it was time for the invocation, stood up shouting, "Hallelujah, brothers! Hallelujah, sisters!" The whole time, Miss Mattie kept on playing the organ, but never did start singing. Yet, when old Toby saw that cat with his one good eye, he was off like greased lightning. He knocked down Walter Goodson, who ruined his brand-new suit that he only had for less than a week since, he got it on sale at his brother's menswear fashion emporium over in Jonesboro. Took off straight for that tabby. Pandemonium erupted. People jumped up, chairs turned over, pies went every which way, and the main pole, what was holding up the whole tent revival, that was provided by the Chapel Valley Funeral Home and Eternal Rest Gardens, it came down on top of the organ. And Miss Addie, in mid-note, Pastor Johnson tried to maintain some semblance of order, shouting, "Fear not, the Lord is among us." But so was Toby. He just about had that little cat, too, when he knocked over a large pot of hot coffee that spilled and scalded Everett Wilkinson, who only come that night 'cause his wife made him. He didn't go to church regular on Sundays, nohow, except if somebody died or was getting married. And there he was, with that piggly-wiggly Colombian roast blend coffee all down his pants, shouting at the top of his lungs to Jasper Johnson, "You son bitch, I'm gonna kill you and your dog both!" Not quite what most people at the revival had come to hear. And Toby would have kept right on leaving mayhem in his path if it hadn't been for Sheriff Barlow, who used to be canine officer before he got elected under what some people said were highly irregular circumstances, 'cause his opponent got run over changing a tire one night over on Highway 17. But just when Toby couldn't tell that the cat had done jumped up a mimosa tree on account of it was on the side where his eye was missing, the sheriff, real quick, reached out, grabbed hold of him by his left rear pork chop. He gave Jasper Johnson a $20 fine on account of disturbing the peace at the revival. He told him he better not ever show his face again in Bean County for as long as he lived. Jasper didn't say nothing, 'cause he didn't live in Bean County nohow. He claimed to have a cousin who worked for a man that was friends with State Senator August P. Collinwood, who represented Sheriff Barlow's district, this being an election year, as it turned out. By the time Jasper Johnson finally got back home with Toby over in Coggins County, it was almost midnight. He was plumb wore out. He took Toby inside, told him to lie down on his blanket and go to bed. "Causing enough trouble for one day," he said. Toby looked up at him with his one good eye, turned around 3 times, finally let out a groan. chuckled as he laid down on his blanket. Then all of a sudden, once he seemed to get comfortable, he started licking his private parts. Jasper just looked at Toby with disgust. "I don't care if you ruined the whole revival tonight and got us chased out of Bean County," he said. "But do you have to do that?" Well, that's one story about Toby. Oh, I'm fixing to tell you another story. Toby finds a friend. It was getting on into the fall of the year, and everybody in Bean County was looking forward to the annual Apple Butter Festival. This year, they was having it over at Carter's Bend on Granny Hawkins' farm. Everybody brought bushels and bushels of apples, what was cooked up in a big open fire kettles all day long, stirred with spatulas about as big as Hiawatha's paddle. There was apple cider, apple dumplings, apple cobbler, apple fritters, and just about anything else you could imagine apples being turned into or made out of. There was bluegrass music, hay wagons, and pony rides for the young'uns, and a special presentation by the Rock City Old-Time Cloggers. They put on what most people claimed was the finest stomping, dancing, and twirling show they ever could recollect. Why, even State Senator August P. Collinwood came all the way over from Rutledge to give them dancers a big old trophy. I never wanted to miss out on social engagement. Miss Pauline Pettigrew arrived there with her new prize pedigreed poodle dog named Gemini. Well, she got to wagging her tongue to everybody that would listen on how Gemini came from champions. She was going to be shown at the grand finals coming up real soon in Chattanooga. Besides, she said, she was going to be featured in a special society edition of the Valley Times. Now, most of the ladies listening just nodded, smiled politely, and just kept on stirring their apple butter with those canoe paddles. Then, just like that, Gemini saw a squirrel, took off after it, dragging poor Miss Pauline to the ground before she finally let hold of the leash. Round the barn, lickety-split they went. And that was the last Miss Pauline saw of her poodle dog. Oh, she was inconsolable. Now, Sheriff Barlow organized a search party with the help of some of the men and commenced looking every which way. But no success. After about 2 hours looking and calling, they decided it was no more use. Now, that's when Jasper Johnson pulled up like a sight for sore eyes. Now, usually most people could care less if they ever saw Jasper or not. But there he was, everybody just coming running from the festival to his truck, where, to their surprise, they saw 22 bushels of apples. His one-eyed hound dog, Toby, and that poodle dog, Gemini, why, just bouncing up and down, having a good old time together. Well, Miss Pauline was, needless to say, so overjoyed, she made Sheriff Barlow promise not to run Jasper off on account of his good deed. She reached into her purse, gave him a $50 reward, which Jasper said he was only going to keep so he could donate it to Senator Collinwood's re-election campaign. Everybody took to swarming round Jasper, wanting to know how he was to find Miss Pauline's poodle dog. Well, he said, he was on his way to the festival when he just reached the Kyle Ford Bridge, only to find it closed. When he took the long way around Short Mountain, that's when he saw Toby and Gemini romping and playing together at Calf Pasture Creek. All he'd done was corral the both of them so he could get back on his way to Granny Hawkins with apples. He said it was the only time he could ever think of where he had Toby with him that he never got into no trouble. About 2 months later, Jasper Johnson got a phone call from Miss Pauline Pettigrew. This time she was madder than a wet hen. She was fit to be tied. "Get your sorry self over here right now," she bellowed, abandoning any pretext of decorum. So, when Jasper arrived, she took him out back to a shed where, bedded down in some straw and an old blanket, was Gemini. "Just look," she said, nearly bursting into tears. "You just look." And what Jasper Johnson saw then was the last thing in the world he thought he would ever see. In the straw, next to Gemini, was 6 newborn pups. Oh, just wiggling, squirmy, eyes barely open, wet noses, little tails, just wagging to beat the band. He leaned over for a closer look. He could tell that 5 of them were pure white powder-puff snowballs, just like their mom, stretched out alongside of them. Other pup, he was considerably larger, evidently quite hungry, intent on pushing his little brothers and sisters out of the way so he could nurse all to himself. And unlike the other pups, who were seemingly quite demure, he was gangly fat with a roly-poly belly, long floppy ears, and a black and brown coarse fur coat. Jasper right then knew then and there that pup was a spitting image of Toby. Now, Jasper didn't know just what to say, but he sure looked like he was proud of his no-count one-eyed hound dog. Miss Pauline threw her hands up in the air. She looked at Jasper and pointed to Gemini lying there with all her pups and said, "Well, Jasper Johnson, I hope you're happy. Because of you and Toby, I guess I won't be going to Chattanooga now after all." Then she paused, looked back at Jasper, and changed her tone. "Them pups look cold, Jasper. Now you go fetch another blanket." Well, that's another one of Toby's adventures. Now I'm going to read you just a bit of the next one. And the last one, Toby and Washi. The good folks of Sabine County, Tennessee, sure do love their bluegrass. That old-time, high, lonesome sound is pure, sweet music to their ears. However, unlike their more cosmopolitan neighbors over in Coggins County, who have a civic auditorium in Piney Flats as a venue for their big-name attractions, they decided they need a place of their own to host fine musical productions. That's when they decided on the old train depot where the Zephyr used to stop. Now, even though the Zephyr hadn't made a run in over 40 years, everybody remembered back in the day when it was the fastest, fanciest way to go anywhere from Roanoke all the way down to Mobile. Old Man Horton bought the place, and all summer long various fraternal organizations, church groups, and after-school volunteers worked like the dickens to get it spruced up. Along with the help from the Grange, they made it into a real fine concert hall with stage and seating inside for well over 27. There was ample room out on the platform for the overflow crowd who could sit on folding chairs or could visit the lemonade stand run by Miss Viola Hawkins' little girl, Libby. So, come the big night of the gala premiere, Bean County was buzzing with more excitement than a nest full of yellow jackets. Valley Times even ran a big article in the paper to announce that the debut lineup, scheduled to appear, among other things, was the Unicorn Mountain Boys, the Dickie Doolittle Band. Oh, the main headliners that everybody was talking about, the new Gospel Rangers. Now, by 7 o'clock, people started showing up, hoping to get the best seats. Round back, the musicians were all warming up, playing impromptu chords as people socialized and drinking lemonade. Before the show began at 8, Pastor Johnson gave the invocation and said how he heard them new Gospel Rangers once before over in Cane Bottom. They seemed just like a band of angels, he said. By jingo, I'm sure it's going to be real good evening, folks. Then the music got started off with the Parker Family Ramblers, and everybody sure was pleased. They was playing every kind of instrument you could imagine. Guitars, fiddlers, dobros, and mandolins. They even had a big bass fiddle that was most taller than anybody on the stage. Them Parkers, being mainly on the short side. Just about the time they was finishing up, the fields had turned brown when Jasper Johnson pulled out up front with his dog, Toby. Now, all this time, Alfie Ramey's boy, Jimmy, was down by the creek next to old Holler, a juniper tree, skipping rocks across the water, reached into his overalls, pulled out a ham and cheese sandwich, and started to take a bite. He looked down. He saw a black snake. He let out a holler, dropped the sandwich, went running back inside. Even with only one good eye, Toby saw that sandwich drop right where it fell by the juniper tree. He real quick jumped loose from the truck, ran over, and swallowed it. Oh! Then he noticed something moving around inside the tree trunk. Right then, if he had a lick of sense, he would have just gone back to the truck. But Toby, well, he never could leave well enough alone. Now, them skunks was minding their own business, not bothering nobody, when Toby went to snarling and barking and digging away at that old tree. Then they started coming out. First, it was just one or two. Then they started coming out 5 or 10 at a time until there must have been over 100 of them little skunks all over everywhere. Toby knew then he done wrong. But it was too late, and they gave him a good dose of what for. Suddenly, out of nowhere, all at once, them skunks started to stampede, running in the general direction of the depot. The widow Darlene Wilson had just stepped outside on the platform. As she was confiding the details of her gallbladder operation to Sally Jane Benbow, she noticed the skunks charging her way, let out a scream loud enough to wake the dead. She turned to run, dropped the program, hollering at the top of her lungs that they was coming to get her. All that commotion just spooked them skunks even more, and they started pouring into the depot, straight through the doors, right up on the stage, all whipped up in a frenzy. Once they got inside, they was too wide-eyed and couldn't find their way back out. Right then, the music quit. People jumped all around the room. Women all commenced screaming and went into hysterics. Men didn't know what to do. People was trying every which way they could to get out from them skunks. Before long, it was everybody for themselves. Next day, it was front page news in the Valley Times. They could never, ever use that depot again for that. Toby was so thoroughly saturated from the skunks that Jasper Johnson had to go all the way down to Cherokee Nation for the only thing that would get rid of that smell. Big Chief Little Shaver of the Qualla tribe mixed up a bunch of Washi tar. He told Jasper to put it all over Toby real good. Leave it on for 3 days, and when it got hard, scrape off with an old corn cob. Finally worked. But old Toby looked pitiful. After lunch on Sunday, Deacon Woodrow Nichols, who was not present at the debacle, asked old man Horton about the whole affair. "Profusion of polecats," he answered, walking toward the parsonage. "Only seen one other time like it when I was a young'un, but it was a whole lot worse." Deacon Woodrow nodded and shook his head. "Can't imagine anything being truly worse than that." Old man Horton just grinned. He looked back at the deacon and replied, "Then, son, you ain't never seen a wild passel of porcupines." Well, now, y'all know a little bit about Toby and his adventures. I hope you had a good time, 'cause we're going to go all across the big pond to another place for another set of people who ain't got nothing similar to the folks I've done been talking about all afternoon this Friday. Till then, y'all have a good weekend.